Hey guys, so for the first time since October 2019, I finally played a deck at an event that was not Cyber Dragons, and I decided to test out Dogmatika Invoked Eldlich DPE, which I did come second place at a Return of YuGiOh Day event, losing only in the finals of Top Cut to Floowandereeze, so big props to you, Zach, if you're watching. Anyways, I'll go over the list and my reasoning for my ratios in the video, but I also want to emphasize that I'm by no means an expert in this deck yet. I mean, I did recently pick it up, so I'm sure I have a lot to learn from you as well, so make sure to chip in on your thoughts, and let's try to make this list better together. So let's just start with the main deck, starting with the Invoked package. So we of course have the 3 Alistair, and we're actually playing just 2 Meltdown. I'll explain that in a bit with the Terraforming, and then the 2 Invocation. These 3 and these 2 are of course standard. The reason why I'm playing just 2 Meltdown instead of 3, so for one, I'm trying to make this list compact as possible, and I decided to sort of trim the fat as much as I can from each of the packages. And the other thing is, so this list is 45 cards, which is another thing I'll get to later. And with 6 cards and a 45 card deck, even going first, or when you're going first, that's still about 53% chance of opening one of the 6 to get your invoked stuff started. So to me, you know, it's sort of an arbitrary cutoff for me in like my deck building in general. Like 1 in 2 chance, I'll take it. I'm fine with that, and I like this ratio so far. Next is the Dogmatika stuff, which is the 2 Ecclesia and the 1 Fleur, as well as the 2 Nadir and the 1 Punishment. So in this sort of Dogmatika Invoke Eldlich list that I've seen online or elsewhere, I find they maybe just play 1 Ecclesia, which I understand as well. I actually kind of like the 2. I mean, you can basically get the Fleur with 1 and the Punishment with the other. Of course, if you can get like Ash Dragon engraved, then you can always just add it directly. And perhaps maybe sometimes that second Ecclesia might be dead, although it serves as a free body to summon, and then if you don't use its effect, at the very least, you know, you're not locked into not being able to summon from the extra deck. The other thing is that you'll notice is that I cut Schism and Maximus entirely, which means no window play. And trust me, at the beginning when I made this deck, I was really focusing on bringing that play out with the Maximus and Schism and window locking my opponent. But a couple things I noticed is that, you know, personally, I find Winda is not so great right now. I mean, for one, let's say Floowandereeze played a lot online at least right now, and you know, it doesn't care about Winda. Another thing is with the Brave engine everywhere, you know, it can just, with the Draco back, it just like, it could just bounce back to Winda as well. And also a lot of people are main decking droplets right now. So for me, especially because playing Maximus and the Schism serve as bricks in this deck, and additional bricks in that because you're already playing Celestial and the Dasher, it's something that I decided just to cut entirely. And the other part was that it did conflict with DPE, right? Basically, you always had to choose if you had options to do both, because if you do Maximus play to bring out Winda, then you can't bring out DPE that same turn because you can't special from the extra deck. Or if you decide to bring out DPE through Anaconda or Fusion Destiny, then you also can't special summon anymore, which means you can't do Maximus. So I didn't like that conflict to begin with, and so I actually really like it like this. Now for the Eldlich part, we of course have the 2 Golden Boys, the 3 Sanguine, 3 Conch, and the 2 Okero. So I noticed that when it comes to like Eldlich variants, typically sometimes this is kind of like the standard ratio, but at the same time I am noticing some players are just doing 1 Okero. I totally understand that. Maybe I'll consider it. I did kind of like having multiple, so I can just kind of like cycle these things around. One thing again with this package that you'll notice that's missing is the Cursed Eldlin, and you might think I'm crazy, and maybe I am. So originally I started with playing 3 Eldlins because that's kind of the standard, and then I cut it to 2, and then I realized, you know what, I'll actually just cut it entirely. So to me, you know, if it's something like Pure Eldlich, for example, you have all these other really strong traps that you're playing that slows your opponent down, and then the Cursed Eldlin helps you get resources over time, right? But you know, because it's not something that can, like, let's say if it could add Sanguine, that's a completely different story, but it only adds Golden Lands. It can add the Golden Lord as well, but you know, it's in your hand, not summoned. And I get it, you can do the whole like, you know, send it with discard it with Eldlich, send the Elden, and then that foolishness. But again, it's just sending the Golden Lands. And so for me, I just felt that it's just better to for me to just hard draw any of the Eldlich traps and get it going from there, because for this deck, like, bringing out the Golden Lord is not the main priority like it is for like an actual Eldlich deck, and I felt this worked fine. And also, like I said earlier, I did want to try to make this list as compact as possible because I am combining multiple packages, and Cursed Eldlin, that's 3 cards that I can cut off, and it honestly worked out fine for me so far, and I haven't missed it. And the final, package, of course, is the Dasher Celestial and the 2 Fusion Destiny. Ideally, you are trying to hard draw the Fusion Destiny. We do play Anaconda, but first turn setting up Anaconda isn't actually, it's not that common in this list. Mainly because, for example, like Ecclesia, if you resolve that, like you can't go into extra deck, or it would be kind of, you would need a different, like a unorthodox kind of hand to really try to bring out Anaconda going first. But it will come up like sort of in the mid-grind game if you don't have access to this. But this package is just too strong. DPE really helps you stay in the game, and most importantly, the Celestial draw effect, it can really close things out as well. And then now we can just cover some of the staples. So first we have the 3 Pot of Prosperity, just to dig in and hopefully get any kind of good engine starter. Ideally, excavate the Fusion Destiny, that'd be nice. But getting something like Invoked stuff if you don't already have access to it, or maybe that you already have what you need and you just have want to get access to like another hand trap or like a floodgate for that extra interruption. And then we have the 3 Droplets, sort of popular card right now where everyone's playing. You can still use it going first, you can just set it, but really therefore in case you lose a Darrow and you're going second, and it's certainly a really strong card. And then lining up with those interruptions are 2 Ash, and then we also have the 3 Imperm. So that basically means we have 8 cards that are kind of flexible for you to be able to go second still, sort of, if you lose a Darrow for game 1. And then lastly, I decided to add some powerhouse traps in Solemn Strike and 3 Summon Limits. So originally I was actually trying out 3 There Can Be Only One, and just sort of relying on drawing one of the floodgates. Like I said, 6 cards in 45, that's like 53% chance of opening one of them if you're going first. But then I realized, there can be only one. If you were to open There Can Be Only One and Summon Limit, then that's kind of redundant, and Summon Limit is better. And the other thing with There Can Be Only One is, against something like Prank Kids, it's just not that great. So I opted to go with Solemn Strike rather, and even going second, Solemn Strike can be actually pretty good. So something you see in like Cyber Dragon traps, for example, they rely a lot on like something like Solemn Strike with the Torrential Tribute. It can still be good going second. A lot of people may argue Summon Limit is completely dead going second. I actually don't agree with that. It sort of depends. Like if it's sort of like a mid-range grindy deck that you're facing, even if you exhaust like all of your resources out their board and you just have the Summon Limit left and then you flip it, they're gonna have a very hard time coming back. And in the grind game situation, you're most likely at an advantage with your Eldlich trap cards, for example. Now of course, if you're going against a really combo heavy deck and they've set up everything, then going second, yeah, of course, Summon Limit is going to be dead. But at the same time, even if this was like a hand trap instead, like you probably weren't going to win that anyways if they, went off. But I really like it going first. It's just super deadly, and I definitely managed to pull it off even going second as well. But these were the traps that I decided to run, and that's sort of why it ended up being 45 cards. Originally, I wanted minimum 42 because of I'm playing Dasher and Celestial, which are 2 dead cards. But then I just felt that adding the Summon Limit, it was just so much more powerful and necessary for me that I decided to up it to 45, especially with all these 3 engines. I thought it ended up being a good number, so it worked out for me. Alright, so on to the extra deck, and this is something where I'm flipping back and forth between certain cards, but of course we're going to start with the Almirage and the Secure Garna, really to get your invocation play started. And the Link Spider is actually quite important because it gets your one of your Eldlich trap monsters into the grave, into this, and A, it serves as an effect monster if you can go into Anaconda, for example, and B, it just gets your Golden Land trap into the grave so that you can banish it for that Sanguine access. We have the Farragut, and this is for the Nadir's Servant. Basically, it will allow you to, draw a card and then put a card back into the bottom of the deck. So it kind of helps you fix your hand. Although keep in mind, if you use Pot of Prosperity, then you cannot use this effect. So if I open Pot of Prosperity, I actually banish this instead because I know I'm not resolving this effect on the first turn. And even though it could possibly come up later in the game, I'm just banishing it anyways. We are playing the Lina. I found that we sort of do need some generic Link 2s where you can use something like a Golden Land trap monster. I did have Nightmare Phoenix before, but I decided to just go with this instead, just because I was toying around with different extra deck monsters that you'll see shortly. And then of course with the Lina, by being able to special your opponent's light monster, which they probably have. For example, even if their main deck is not light, they probably playing Lancia or Ghost Ogre in their light. And then you can also go into Unicorn and shuffle back that problematic monster. And as I alluded to earlier, we do have the Anaconda. We don't go into it as often as something, let's say, like Cyber Dragons that I play, but it is there, and it's definitely important to bring out the DPE, who, Speak of the Devil, is right here, and just really like the best extra deck monster that this deck and probably a lot of decks have. And it just helps you just constantly pop things, comes back, allows you to also the fusion package will help you with the draw and stuff. And then we have some Invoke monster, just one mecha buff for this list. It's really good for that general negate, although to be honest with you, most of the time you're probably only being able to do the monster negate because you do have the Alistair in hand. But with the good thing with the Eldlich part is that you do have more traps than a traditional like Dogmatika Invoke build, for example. So you could have a potential trap negate more often as well, such as Evenly that a lot of people are playing right now. Purgatrio, I actually really like this card. It helps for OTKs, it just attacks every monster that your opponent has. It also pierces, and if you also pump it with Alistair, it just adds just a ton of damage. But I admit, doing the math for this before going into it does get difficult because you have to keep taking account of its attack changing every time you get rid of one of your opponent's monsters, for example. And then we have the YuGiOhs, really strong in terms of just being able to pop. The main reason I go into this is so that I can banish my opponent's DPE in their graveyard just so they can't get it back. Of course, this against Floowandereeze is pretty bad because they do not special summon. I originally had Cut Raijin, but I actually decided to put it back in because turns out, you know, the wind monsters in your opponent's grave can come up. Namely, the only one I can think of right now is like Shen. That's the big one against Virtual World because it is wind and it just keeps coming back. And being able to banish everything on the field is pretty bad for this deck. We also, of course, have the Ash Dragon that you're sending off something like Nadir's Servant or maybe even Dogmatika Punishment. Make sure to remember to add or special off this effect in the end phase. Keep in mind though, if you use something like, let's say, Scarlet Sanguine, that same turn, you are locked into zombies, so you're not going to be able to special with this effect and you'll only be able to add it. So just keep things like that in mind. And then we have the Double Entis again with the Nadir or the Dogmatika Punishment, just so you can get those extra pops. And this card's really good. The one downside is that, so I used to also try the Gustav Max and Leave play with the Eldlich. It just never came up, but the one plus with having those was that it at least had a high attack for me to be able to pop with punishment, because if you look at it right here, basically the highest attack is 2500, which means that's as far as you can go with the punishment. So I'm still tinkering around with the extra deck. I might still shift things around, but for now this is what I went with for this tournament specifically. Okay, so lastly, let's just cover the side deck, which is also ever-changing, but we're going to start with the 3 Artifact Lancia. I think this is a must. It's sort of like the most played hand trap right now, which you would have seen if you saw my most recent hand trap analysis video, just to prevent them from banishing. Of course, you do have to get used to your opponents activating this on you, because we do banish quite a lot as well. And then we also decided to just go with the Droll. And so originally I was thinking, Nibiru, Ghost Ogre, but you know, I thought that perhaps, for example, like when I play Cyber Dragons, I play Nibiru or Ghost Ogre, and it's because I'm fine with them. I expect them to still play through it, but you know, it's still kind of hindered their end board a little bit, and Cyber Dragons would just be able to OTK and whatever. But with this deck, you know, we don't kill that often in one turn, and I just want hand traps that shut down certain mechanics for the entire turn. I just have a better chance of setting my stuff up while my opponent wasn't able to do much on their turn. And then we're also playing triple Gamma Seal. So this was something I decided to do because, for example, against any kind of like tower-like monster, let's say a Rival Ignister, and I get it, it's not a meta tier 1 deck, but it is a popular rogue deck, but I just didn't like the fact that like we literally can't out that thing otherwise without something like Gamma Seal, unless you are able to like prevent them from setting it up in the first place with hand traps, right? I mean, like, yes, a YuGiOh, you can like pump its attack up, but then that requires multiple turn setup, which you probably won't have. And Gamma Seal, and it's not like it's just for a Rival Ignister, that'd be silly. It's just good against a lot of decks, essentially. It's very generic. And you may wonder, hey, why not play Godarla instead because of the wind barrier? A couple reasons. A is that Godarla is 2700 attack, and that's actually kind of problematic for this deck. I mean, like, sure, you could pump up, like, let's say your Mechaba with, like, the Alistair, but then you're just wasting that Alistair just to out the Godarla that you just gave to your opponent. And whereas this is just 2200. And also against Floowandereeze, you know, I'm not, like, Godarla is not going to do much anyways, because they're still going to be able to use their trap and then just keep summoning again. And they also have the end pin, for example. So I really like having Gamma Seal. And of course, you could also, if you had Godarla, like, you could pop it with DPE if you had access to it, but it's not, like, as reliable to get DPE out all the time, so I just wanted to make sure that I go with the safest approach, which was the Gamma Seal. And then the next one is we have the triple Lightning Storm. Ideally, you know, evenly match is better, at least for this deck, and I was trying that out a lot. The problem I was going up against was, as I mentioned earlier, people will side Lancia against you. So when you go into battle phase and you do evenly, they chain Lancia, so now you neg really hard, right? Like, you just wasted your battle phase, you couldn't resolve evenly, and you also can't do like your Invoke play, for example, or banish your Eldlich traps at the end phase. So it just ended up being so that I was just negging way too hard, and even though I would prefer to play evenly, I decided to just go with Lightning Storm instead and just, again, play that safer approach. And the final card in the side is the Triple Solemn Judgments for when you're going first post side, just so you can try to stop your opponents from activating their backward removal. Most likely that's what they're siding against you, so that's what I'm trying to stop. But sometimes against a deck like, let's say, Prankids or like Floowandereeze, just negating their first normal summon is pretty deadly, so I really like this side so far. But again, I'm pretty open to switching things around. Alright guys, so that's it for the deck profile and my reasoning for my card choices. Again, I'm not an expert on this deck yet, but I do hope to get there someday, and also have a better sense on how to improve this build over time. So that's it for me. Take care guys.